Why does God allow bad people to succeed? And does he even care about justice? Why doesn't he do something? These thoughts come to us often. Did you ever secretly wish that someone would go and assassinate Putin? I found myself doing that once. But Jesus dealt with these questions of ours in today's story, the parable of the weeds and the wheat. Last week we talked about parables being puzzles, and I found this one very puzzling until I got some tips from the experts, from the saints. So I'll share these tips with you later, but let's read the Gospel first. A reading from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 13. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the servants of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The servants said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. The word of the Lord. So let's think about this parable and we'll answer a few questions first to jog our memories. What kind of seed did the farmer grow in his field? Good seed, which was wheat grains. Then why were there problems? Because an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. Now weeds were probably darnel. That's darnel on the right and wheat on the left. They look very similar. Even when they are growing, they look exactly the same. It's only when the grains appear that the wheat stands upright and the darnel sort of bends down. Apparently, it often happened that rival farmers would actually do the mischief that Jesus described. And so the farmers often had kept watchmen to guard the farm during the early days after sowing. Now back to the story. How come the enemy managed to do this mischief? Because people were sleeping, the servants were sleeping. So the servants were actually the ones to blame, though they questioned the master about the seeds he had sown. They said, if you actually sowed good seed, then how come these weeds have appeared? Don't we do the same? Sometimes when things start going wrong in the world or in our lives, we tend to blame God. Said, he must have done something wrong. But it's really we human beings who allowed Satan to enter in. Expert tip number 1. Saint Jose Maria Escriva said, the situation is clear. The field is fertile and the seed is good. The Lord of the field has scattered the seed at the right moment and with great skill. He even has watchmen to make sure that the field is protected. If afterwards there are weeds among the wheat, it is because men have failed to respond, because they, and Christians in particular, have fallen asleep and allowed the enemy to approach. So when the servants realized what had actually happened, what did they want to do? They wanted to pull out the weeds. But the farmer said no. What reason did he give? He said, if you pull out the weeds, you will pull out the wheat as well. That's because the roots were, by the time they grew, they would be totally entwined with each other. So you try to pull out the weeds, you will pull out wheat as well. The man told the servants to wait. For how long were they supposed to wait? Till harvest time. He said, let them grow together till harvest time. Then what would happen? What would the farmer say? The farmer would order the weeds to be burnt and gather the wheat into his barn. Let's listen to one more expert, Pope Francis. He said, with patience and mercy, God watches over the field of each person's life. He sees much better than we do the filth and the evil. But he also sees the seeds of good, and he waits with trust for them to grow. God is patient. He knows how to wait. And here's tip number 3 from the Catechism. All members of the Church, including her ministers, must acknowledge that they are sinners. In everyone, the weeds of sin will still be mixed with good wheat of the gospel until the end of time. So, what are we learning from these experts? That all of us are like, even our hearts are like the field. Not only the world is like the field, but we too have both good and bad. We have the wheat and the darnel. And we will have some sin in us even till the day we die. It's good for us to accept it, to be humble, and to seek God's mercy. And maybe if we realize this, we will also learn to be merciful to others more easily. And finally, let's listen to Saint Augustine, who is another expert because he was a shepherd, he was a bishop, and he cared for people's souls. He says, many are at first weeds and later become wheat. If these persons, when they are evil, were not tolerated patiently, they would never reach the praiseworthy change in their life. So wrong will be dealt with at the correct time. That's what Jesus assures us through this parable. Justice will be done. Of course, there are times when we also have to speak and act for what is right, just as Jesus did. But we don't have to get frustrated and angry because we know that God is in control. The main message of this parable is trust in God and be patient and merciful like Him. I'd like to share the story of a very remarkable gentleman from Chennai. He happens to be my brother's father-in-law. And just this morning, I was talking to Mr. Nirmal, and he shared with me his experience of 2 thugs from a slum in Chennai. And he explained that the people in the slum were originally refugees from Myanmar, and they had been just settled in this really terrible place. No drinking water, no toilets, no roads, nothing. And out of this slum, there were 2 rival gangs, and the leaders of these 2 gangs had committed a lot of murders, killing the members of the other gang, opposite gang. And it was really like nasty. They would, some were killed in court in front of everyone, one in his hospital bed. So most people wrote them off as gone cases. But Mr. Nirmal befriended them. He would go to the prison and meet them. And he worked on their strengths. He asked to get custody of these 2 gang leaders. He said they had 2 strengths. They were very strong physically and they had mental resilience too. So he was talking not just about these 2 leaders, but all the people there. And so he worked on their strengths. He introduced them to football. He even managed to get a football stadium built for them. At the same time, he worked on giving them a better environment. So, this is one of the roads that before Mr. Nirmal set to work, and this is what it looked like after. He built roads, toilets, trees. Now, both these two, his efforts bore much fruit because not only these two gang leaders, but many people who were into crime gave up on crime publicly and they became new people. Here are the two ex-gangsters and ex-rivals who became friends and who visited Mr. Nirmal at his home here. So, like Saint Augustine and like Jesus, Mr. Nirmal believed in working on the good rather than focusing on what was wrong. What about you? What does this parable say to you? What is Jesus asking of you today? Spend some time quietly and meditate on what Jesus has said. Respond to him. Ask him for the help you need to live out what you have learned, to trust him, to bring justice at the right time, to learn from him how to be patient, both with yourself and with others, and to focus on growing the good, growing the wheat rather than attacking evil. If you are in a family or sharing group, you could think of someone who is causing pain to others and pray for him or her. And maybe you could think of some action to bring out good in that person. So bye from Family Faith Time. See you next week. And all the best with growing wheat. It would be nice if you share this video with somebody